Yhwach, often referred to simply as Your Majesty, Yhwach, by his underlings, is the father of the Quincy, Quincy no Shishi, and the emperor of the Wandenreich, with the designation A, the Almighty. He is the son of the Soul King. The eye pattern on Yhwach's face after he absorbs Mimihagi, as noted by Yatsunemaya, the manifestation of Ichigo's Quincy powers heavily resembles Yhwach's appearance from 1,000 years ago. Similarly, the Bankai form of this manifestation looks like Yhwach when he was in his teenage years. During the Wandenreich's second invasion, his maroon-black cloak is replaced with a white version. After absorbing Mimihagi's powers, Yhwach gains a black pattern of eyes running down the left side of his face and onto his chest, and his left eye becomes inverted in coloration. Yhwach's appearance after absorbing the Soul King. After completely absorbing the Soul King, Yhwach gains a dark mask of eyes covering the upper half of his face and begins constantly oozing darkness. Later on, darkness begins flowing from and covering his entire body, leaving only his hands, feet, knees, and part of his face and chest visible. Personality. Yhwach is a self-proclaimed lover of peace, hating conflict and believing painful battles should be ended as quickly as possible. He holds the first generation of the Godai 13 in great respect, for they were Shinigami who could strike fear into his heart. He especially admired Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto, whom he called a demon for treating his subordinates as expendable ashes. Yhwach despises values like justice and honor, which is why he hates how the Godai 13 became weak during the 1,000 years of his absence. He also dislikes lies, and does not give any falsities to the existence of his subordinates. Yhwach treats his subordinates and the Quincy very differently. He is very fond of some of them, calling them his sons. He puts great effort into forcibly recruiting them into his empire. Yhwach can show mercy and appreciation, thanking Lloyd for sacrificing himself in a suicidal mission and granting him a quick death via obliteration after the latter lost most of his torso. Yhwach dislikes blind loyalty, and was glad that his Sternritter showed outspoken discontent with his choice of successor. In front of his subordinates, Yhwach is a man adamant in his disapproval of infighting, though he will not hesitate to stop the conflict using the most brutal methods possible. Yhwach's contempt for Rainkar is apparent, mercilessly wounding and slaying even those who have sworn allegiance to him when he deems them to have fulfilled their use. After his awakening, Yhwach heartlessly robbed impure Quincy of their powers, causing many to die. Yamamoto states this same disregard extends to all of his underlings, regardless of species or position, and is an attitude which Yhwach has allegedly always possessed. This is proven when he ultimately uses his Ausvalen to fatally steal power from Gerard Valkyrie, one of his elite guards, and Jugram Hashwalth, his trusted second-in-command and other half. After absorbing the power of Ichigo Kurosaki, Yhwach believes that he and his Sternritter are comrades and that they should be prepared to assist each other whenever necessary, even if it means certain members should be sacrificed. For others, he demonstrated this belief by using Ausvalen to steal the life force of the Sternritter who had been left behind in order to revive his fallen Schutzstaffel. Yhwach wants to create a world without fear of death, which is done by collapsing the human world, Soul Society, and even Weko Mundo together. Yhwach also cannot stand his father's existence as the Soul King, a sealed and mutilated linchpin made to stabilize the Soul Society and keep the world separate. He wishes to cease his father's endless humiliation. This desire of his is so strong it even seeps into other Quincy who have his blood, and they will be forced to slay the Soul King. Yhwach in his youth. As a baby, Yhwach could not see, hear, speak, or even move. Despite this, he was not afraid, and would not have cried even if he had the ability to because he knew he would continue to live on. The people around him treated Yhwach with great reverence because everyone who touched Yhwach found they gradually gained something which they lacked. This occurred because Yhwach possessed the power to share out his own soul. Anyone who touched him received a fragment of his soul, and those fragments healed the wounds which their own souls alone could not. At the same time, as their wounds slowly healed, the various aspects of each person were all imprinted upon the fragments of Yhwach's soul, which they had received until those fragments returned to Yhwach at the moment of their owners' deaths. Even though none who touched Yhwach lived for much longer, the people continued to gather around him. As he regained the fragments of his soul that he had shared out, Yhwach's body began to gain function. In time, when his deaf ears became able to hear, Yhwach realized the people had begun to call him by an unusual name, Yhwach. He understood this was the name of the god these people worshipped, but he chose nonetheless to take this name for his own. Yhwach conquers the northern lands. Yhwach is credited with being the progenitor of the Quincy, which they revere as their king, and his blood flows in every Quincy. Later, he eventually discovered a much more powerful way to distribute his soul, by engraving a letter, signifying an ability, directly onto another's soul. He could share out his soul more deeply, and with greater power. Leelbaro was the first Quincy Yhwach bestowed a shrift upon. At some point during his history, Yhwach was given the letter A. In over 200 years after his birth, Yhwach himself had formed a kingdom of Quincy known as the Lichtreich, Reiterete, German for Light Empire, Japanese for Empire of Light, that conquered the northern lands where Jugram Hashwalt and Basbs village and forest were located, both of which he burned down. 5 years later, he informed Zydrits that he wished to create a new army. When Zydrits pointed out how they had conquered all the nearby countries, Yhwach stated they had not yet conquered Soul Society before revealing that he intended to create an army called the Sternritter for this purpose. Yhwach selects Hashwalt to be his right-hand man because the latter is his other half. Eventually, Yhwach sent out 2 of his personal guards, Hubert and Argola, to inform nearby villages of the formation of the Sternritter. While Basby was confronting Hubert, Yhwach arrived and pinned almost everyone present to the ground with his Reiatsu. Declaring his intention to find a right-hand man, Yhwach selected Hashwalt, whom he recognized as his other half. Yhwach declared that Hashwalt would join the Sternritter before preparing to leave. However, when Hashwalt claimed that Basby would be a better right-hand man to him, Yhwach noted that this was just as he had foreseen before revealing that Hashwalt shared his ability to grant powers to others. After explaining how this was the catalyst behind Basby's prodigal powers, Yhwach told Hashwalt that he needed the latter at his side before being defended from Basby's Heilig file by Hashwalt. Yhwach is revived by Alsvilen. About 1,000 years ago, Yhwach engaged in battle with the Shinigami during which he fought Genryu Shigakuni Yamamoto, with neither leader succeeding in killing the other. Sometime around or during the course of this event, Yhwach witnessed the capabilities of Yamamoto's Bankai, Zonka no Tachi. After his battle with Yamamoto, Yhwach supposedly lost his powers. Quincy folklore spoke of him as the Sealed King. After 900 years of being sealed, he would regain his pulse. After another 90, he would regain his intellect. And, after 9 more years, he would absorb the power of every impure Quincy to make their abilities his own. With Alsvalen, he did this to Kanae Katagiri, killing her, and to Masaki Kurosaki, who died during her fight with Grand Fisher due to the loss of her powers. All impure Quincy were killed except for Ryu Ishida. Yhwach later reveals this song is known as the Kaisergesang, Kaisergesangu, German for Emperor Song, Japanese for Praise Song of the Secret Emperor, viz King Sim, and has another verse stating the Sealed King would regain the world after 9 days. When A's note survived an incident and was hospitalized, Yhwach visited him and granted him power. At some point during the 17 months after the defeat of Sosuke Aizen, the Wandenreich conquered Wekomundo, and Yhwach personally defeated its ruler, Tyr Haribel. Imprisoning her, he claimed the territory of Wekomundo for the Wandenreich, regarding it as another foundation stone for the invasion of Soul Society. Yhwach permits Luthers Freegan to kneel before him. Plot the Thousand-Year Blood War arc. Upon Luthers Freegan's return to the Wandenreich base, Yhwach states he dislikes conflict and severs Luther's arm as punishment for arguing with Askyro Ebern. After Luthers declines his offer to lie down before him in exchange for his legs, Yhwach questions his estimate of 5 days being required for them to prepare for the war with Soul Society. Asking Luthers if he is a prophet, Yhwach listens to Luthers' denial of this title and asks him why he had been talking about the future, for he only wanted to know about what was happening at the present point in time, before killing Luthers. Turning his attention to Ebern, Yhwach admits he has no reason to praise or blame Ebern, for he effectively delayed Ichigo Kurosaki, and states his role is over before saying Ebern will be a foundation stone for peace in death. When Ebern is decapitated, Jugram Hashwalt asks Yhwach if it is alright to kill the Arrancar, for they do not need to be taught how to fight. Dismissing this, Yhwach climbs newly formed stairs to a room behind his throne and states they can acquire as many as they need, thanks to Wekomundo already being their dominion. As he looks at the imprisoned Tyr Haribel, Yhwach arrives in Soul Society. When told Ebern's medallion was used, but was unable to seal Ichigo's Bankai, Yhwach cites a special plan would be needed to do so. Declaring hot-blooded fools could be useful at times, he instructs Hashwalt to have the jagged army of Wekomundo collect a few idiots alive. Later, when told of Ichigo's ongoing battle with Quiljopi, Yhwach notes this is the perfect opportunity to invade Soul Society before ordering all of the Sternritter to be notified. Later, Yhwach appears in the air above Ryunosuke Yuki and members of the 13th Division as they ready themselves for battle and states thinking they will attack from one of Sarate's gates makes sense before saying war is always a bitter affair. When the group loses their composure in the face of Hidetomo Kajamaru's defeat, Yhwach permits Hashwalt to spare the others if he thinks it is the benign choice. The real Yhwach appears behind Yamamoto. Later, As Captain Commander Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto realizes his opponent was not Yhwach, but was instead his subordinate, Royd Lloyd, who had used his abilities to mimic Yhwach's disposition, memories, and appearance, the 1st Division barracks are destroyed. Appearing behind Yamamoto, Yhwach thanks Royd for his service before incinerating his remains. When asked what he had been up to this entire time, Yhwach asks Yamamoto what lies beneath the 1st Division building before explaining how he had gone to the Central Great Underground Prison to speak with Sosuke Aizen, though his offer to join their army was, predictably declined. Continuing, Yhwach asks Yamamoto if he has exhausted his power fighting Royd. Yhwach steals Yamamoto's Bankai. When Yamamoto attempts to use his Bankai again, Yhwach steals it with his medallion and reveals it is not that they were unable to take Yamamoto's Bankai, but the power of Zonka no Tachi is too enormous for anyone other than Yhwach himself to handle, so he ordered Royd not to do anything regarding this until he had returned. Goading the Captain Commander by asking if he should use Yamamoto's Bankai to resurrect the dead Shinigami, Yhwach manifests a second weapon from above. With a wave of his sword, Yhwach bids Yamamoto farewell and attacks him. Yhwach obliterates Yamamoto's body. With Yamamoto bifurcated by the attack, Yhwach derides him and attempts to leave, only for Yamamoto to grab hold of his cloak. Cutting off the Captain Commander's arm, Yhwach reveals he had not listed him as a special war power because of his foolish reluctance to exploit others, which had made him grow weak, stating the original Godai 13 was a group to be feared, and Yamamoto did whatever it took to win. Yhwach says Soul Society will die soon, but unbeknownst to Yamamoto, the Godai 13 died 1,000 years ago. Unleashing innumerable arrows from an outstretched finger, Yhwach completely obliterates Yamamoto's body. Yhwach is surprised by an unexpected explosion. After ordering Hashwalt to inform the Sternritter that they are to demolish Soul Society, Yhwach observes the ensuing devastation in the wake of the advancing Soldat. With the Serete and the main forces of the Godai 13 decimated, Yhwach prepares to declare a retreat in order to await the Royal Guard's inevitable arrival, only to be startled by an explosion in the air above him, confirming the Reiatsu is indeed Ichigo's. Yhwach declines Hashwalt's request to eliminate him and states they are leaving. As Tensa's Angetsu is thrust into the ground before them, they are intercepted by Ichigo. Yhwach is engulfed by Ichigo's Reiatsu. Though unaware of exactly how Ichigo had escaped Quilljet's jail, Yhwach congratulates him on doing so before asking Ichigo if he is really intending on fighting with his body's current condition. When asked if he is the enemy's leader, Yhwach states he both is and is not before confirming he is responsible for the current state of Soul Society. As an enraged Ichigo emits a large amount of Reiatsu, Yhwach is left with no option other than to crush him. Unaffected by a Getsuga Tensho, Yhwach pins Ichigo to the ground, before subduing him by stabbing him in the throat with his sword. Affirming Ichigo is still breathing, Yhwach orders Hashwalt to bring Ichigo back to their castle, where they can recruit him into their army. When Ichigo awakens, Yhwach deduces the pronounced veins stopping his sword are in fact blood venae before being engulfed by Ichigo's Reiatsu. Yhwach is prevented from attacking further. Emerging mostly unharmed, Yhwach admits he had made a mistake in using a pure Quincy to stop Ichigo, for this awoke the memories in his Reiatsu. He reveals in trying to escape Quilljet's jail, Ichigo absorbed some of the surrounding Reiatsu, which awoke the memories deep within his soul and allowed him to escape, for the jail cannot trap a Quincy, stating Ichigo knows nothing about himself, not even about his own mother. Yhwach threatens to drag Ichigo to the Wandenreich and tell him everything there. As the two clash, Yhwach prepares to stab Ichigo, only for shadows to appear below him. When told his time outside of the Schadenbereich is up, Yhwach realizes Aizen had confused his perception of time while they spoke and turns to leave. As Hashwalt intercepts Ichigo's subsequent attack, Yhwach departs while declaring he will return for Ichigo. The Wandenreich gathers before Yhwach. Several days later, he asks Hashwalt where the subject is. When Hashwalt states he is here, Yhwach greets the newly recruited Uryu Ishida before proclaiming they will fight together. Yhwach is later saluted by the Sternritter as he announces he has information for them. Announcing Uryu will become his successor, much to the dismay and shock of several Sternritter, Yhwach states they do not need to doubt his decision because they will see Uryu's power for themselves in the upcoming fights. Yhwach completes the ceremony with Uryu. Later, in his chambers, Yhwach tells Uryu the ceremony is over and states Uryu's power will soon awaken. Saying he will give Uryu a shrift, Yhwach bestows him with the letter A, which is his own letter as well. When Uryu asks why he specifically was chosen as his successor, Yhwach asks why he is alive. much to Ryu's shock. Before stating all mixed blood Quincy died during Ausvalen except for Ryu, proclaiming he named Ryu his successor because he was the first one to survive Ausvalen in all of history. Yhwach surmises Ryu possesses a power which can surpass his own, which is why he was chosen to succeed him. Stating Ryu does not have to question anything, Yhwach tells him to come with him. Yhwach, Yhwach, and Ryu appear in Soul Society. Shortly after the Sarate vanishes, Yhwach appears on a building with Ryu and Yhwach and states the invasion is complete before asking Ryu if he knows the Kaiser Gezong. When Ryu confirms this and recites it, Yhwach notes there is another verse: after 9 years of regaining his powers, he will regain the world in 9 days. He instructs Yhwach and Ryu to come, for the world will end in 9 days. Later, Yhwach elaborates on how the Wandenreich managed to make Sarate vanish and reveals that Quincy escaped into the Sarate, the most vulnerable area in Soul Society, and created a space in the shadows after they lost the war 1,000 years ago, which is why they named themselves the Hidden Empire. Yhwach watches as numerous Sternritter across the Sarate activate their Quincy, Vollständig. Rukia Kuchiki is the current captain of the 13th Division. She formerly served as lieutenant of the 13th Division under Captain Jushiro Ukitake. Rukia is the adoptive sister of Byakuya Kuchiki, a friend of Ichigo Kurosaki, and is married to Renji Abarai. Initially born into a lower class, Rukia retains her modesty, even as an adopted member of the nobility. She is graceful and clean, yet chooses to talk to ordinary people. However, her cool and lone demeanor often forces her to hide her personal troubles, even from her friends. According to Ukitake, Rukia never opens up her heart, and has difficulty making friends. Rukia is clueless about the ways of the modern human world. She is very good at acting, having acted her way through a number of tough situations, such as getting out of trouble with school teachers and convincing the Kurosaki family to let her stay at their house. Yhwach has Yhwach summon the key. Later during the night, Yhwach falls asleep. When Masked Masculine is defeated, the sleeping Yhwach calls James back. When dawn comes, Yhwach wakes up and thanks the souls of the fallen for his continued ability to perceive the world. Later that day, Yhwach watches silently as the meteorite which Grammy Thalmo summoned hurtles toward the Sarate. Soon afterward, when Ichigo arrives in the Sarate, Yhwach notes his appearance and informs Yhwach and Ryu that they will begin. Watching Ichigo and Candace Katnipp's battle from afar, Yhwach tells Yhwach to summon the key. As Yhwach does so, Yhwach says they will thank the one who brought them to the light. As a beam of light pierces the heavens, Yhwach tells everyone to be with him. Yhwach, Yhwach, and Ryu leave Soul Society. Yhwach begins speaking to Ichigo and explains how Ichigo's clothes possess enormous defensive powers because they are made from the bones and hair of Royal Guard members, allowing Ichigo to break through the 72 barriers between Soul Society and the Soul King Palace unscathed. However, Yhwach reveals that because of this power, the barriers are unable to reform for the following 6,000 seconds, causing Ichigo to realize he plans to depart for the palace. Ichigo quickly reaches their location, causing Yhwach to take note of his arrival. He watches the short confrontation between Ryu and Ichigo before telling Ryu it's time to go. He asks Ryu if he said farewell considering this will be forever and then starts ascending towards the palace together with Ryu and Yhwach. Soon afterward, Yhwach, Yhwach, and Ryu arrive at the Soul King Palace. Yhwach arrives at the Soul King Palace. When Yhwach notes where they are, Yhwach claims to know how he feels, but Yhwach states a rotten gravestone does not make him feel anything before having Yhwach summon several Zoldat to invade. When Tenjiro Kirinji arrives, defeats the Zoldat, and introduces himself, Yhwach demands to know if Kirinji believes he can defeat him, prompting Kirinji to confirm this before engulfing those present in his hot spring water. After explaining the water's properties, Kirinji releases his Zanpakuto and attacks Yhwach. Kirinji's attacks all miss Yhwach despite the latter not dodging them. Yhwach walks away from Kirinji only to be confronted by Shinjamaru Shutara, who says it has been a long time. She gives out that he has entered the palace without an invitation and has her soldiers surround him. The soldiers attack Yhwach, but they too are unable to hit him. The confrontation is interrupted when Sternritter W. Nyanzal Weisal appears out of the ground. Yhwach revives his Schutzstaffel with Ausvalen. After Nyanzal is killed by Shinjamaru, Yhwach watches as she summons more soldiers and claims that he can now be harmed. Countering this, Yhwach summons several Zoldat from his shadow to combat Shinjamaru's soldiers. He then calls on his Schutzstaffel, Gerard Valkyrie, Lil Baro, Pernita Prajaz, and Askin Naklavar, to take on the Royal Guard. After Nimaya defeats his Schutzstaffel, Yhwach's hands begin to glow as Nimaya challenges him. Yhwach activates Ausvalen and steals the power and life force of the Sternritter in the Sarate below in order to revive his Schutzstaffel, whom he tells to go forth. Yhwach confronts Sakaiba after escaping from the Cage of Life. After initiating the Alsvalen and the destruction of the Cage of Life, Yhwach appears before Yhwach Hyasub and asks him if he will allow him to pass, only for Yhwach to tell him to be careful speaking his name so easily, for it is likely to crush his throat. When Yhwach draws a line on the floor and states this is where he will defeat him, Yhwach notes this is a bit small before claiming Yhwach will die 3 steps before this. However, Yhwach is interrupted when an enormous hand shoves him off the side of the palace. When Yhwach explained to him that this hand will push him 1,000 ri away, Yhwach attempts to say something, but finds he cannot speak. After Yhwach pushes him downward with another hand, Yhwach punctures his own throat and proclaims that he gives himself the power of voice before using Zonkbogen to shoot himself through the chest with a Heilig file, prompting Yhwach to note he must kill him. Yhwach is slashed vertically by Yhwach. Noting that he must kill Yhwach because of his failure to atone, Yhwach draws his brush as Yhwach prepares to clash with him. Yhwach and Yhwach clash, with Yhwach noting that he looks much happier than he expected. When Yhwach deflects Yhwach's brush with his arm, Yhwach reveals that his brush can cut names. As a shocked Yhwach's arm falls to his side. Yhwach reveals that Yhwach's arm is now R and that his physical capabilities have been cut in half before slashing him down the center of his body, causing Yhwach to fly back into the palace. Moving back to the palace, Yhwach asks Yhwach what he thinks about being cut to pieces, prompting a grinning Yhwach to demand to know if he looks like he is suffering as Reishi gathers around him. Yhwach restores his physical and spiritual power. Yhwach gets to his feet as he explains to Yhwach that he can merely restore anything which Yhwach takes from him and that everything in the world is his for the taking before sending his Reishi pillars hurtling toward Yhwach. When Yhwach blocks the pillars and uses Bakuto number 62 Hyaporonkan on him, Yhwach activates Bleachanime to protect himself and explains how it is a defensive wall that expands outside the body. Yhwach uses Urahato, Senato, Tepasatsu to seemingly break through and grabs Yhwach by the neck, but Yhwach reveals that Bleachanime consumes everything around it as black lines appear on Yhwach's arm. However, Yhwach merely ruptures Yhwach's face and reprimands him for daring to invade the body of the royal guard before releasing his Zanpakuto, Ichimonji. The ink of Ichimonji covers Yhwach's face. Noting he does not sense any Reiatsu despite Yhwach releasing his Zanpakuto, Yhwach looks at Ichimonji and tries to figure out what is wrong, prompting Yhwach to ask him if he cannot tell the difference between a pen and a sword before attacking him. As he and Yhwach clash, Yhwach points out how Yhwach is merely spraying ink everywhere before proclaiming that he will simply take back his powers no matter how many times Yhwach removes them. However, Yhwach falls silent with shock, prompting Yhwach to reveal his sword does not have a name anymore before explaining how anything Ichimonji covers and ink loses its name. When Yhwach asks him if he really believes he can kill him now, Yhwach holds out his hand and claims he will simply steal Yhwach's powers before using Zonkdalter. However, Yhwach effortlessly shrugs off the spell and explains how his Zanpakuto wields the power of darkness, which is why Yhwach cannot steal his power, before covering Yhwach's face in ink. Yhwach recovers with the Almighty. As Yhwach stands covered in ink, Yhwach notes it must have been painful for him to lose his name before activating his Bankai, Shurafude Ichimonji, and giving Yhwach the name of Black Ant. Yhwach smashes Yhwach through the floor with a giant foot and bids him farewell before crushing him between 2 giant hands. Wondering if this is how it will end for him, Yhwach bursts through the floor of the palace entrance and attacks Yhwach, who wonders what is going on as Hashwalt reveals this is the power of the Almighty. Yhwach defeats Yhwach. Yhwach notes Yhwach must have many questions about how he can be doing this before explaining how the Almighty allows him to see into the future and use any power he knows of, which means he cannot be defeated. When Yhwach attempts to defeat him by using the black on his body for Futentai Satsurio in order to strip him of everything he possesses, Yhwach points out how he has regained his name and proclaims he will be the one to take everything away from Yhwach before blasting him. Noting that Yhwach died in 3 steps just as predicted, Yhwach observes that the royal guard have been defeated and proclaims the Soul King is next. Yhwach stabs the Soul King. Soon afterward, Yhwach reaches the main palace, where he slaughters the Soul King's servants before confronting the Soul King himself. Claiming the Soul King is an imperfect god too weak to run away, Yhwach proclaims he shall end his humiliation here and notes the Soul King likely foresaw this day 89, before stabbing the Soul King, whom he addresses as his father and bids farewell. However, Yhwach is interrupted by the arrival of Ichigo and his friends behind him. Mentally cursing Yhwach, Yhwach turns to face Ichigo. Yhwach reveals Ichigo is too late to save the Soul King. When Ichigo states that they have come to stop him, Yhwach admits he had already seen it before explaining how he can see the future due to his new eyes and how he knows about Yhwach's revival before revealing the impaled Soul King behind him. Ichigo leaps past him in an attempt to help the king, but Yhwach lets him do so while stating that Ichigo must be prepared to destroy Soul Society. When Ichigo's right side is enveloped in blue veins, Yhwach explains how the Quincy blood within him will never permit the existence of the Soul King and invites him to watch the destruction of Soul Society as Ichigo slashes the Soul King across the chest. Yhwach is surrounded by dozens of razor-sharp wires. Yhwach explains to Ichigo how his power allowed him to transfer the Reiatsu still present in his sword to Ichigo, which his blood reacted to. When Ichigo attacks him, Yhwach effortlessly blocks his sword and points out how it is pointless to fight him any further because Soul Society will be destroyed regardless. Yhwach goes on to explain how the Soul King keeps the flow of souls in balance and claims it is Ichigo's fault that everything will fall apart, only to stop in surprise upon seeing several razor-sharp wires placed around him by Yoruichi, who tells Orihime to revive the Soul King. However, when Orihime's sodden kiss shatters around the king, Yhwach proclaims that the Soul King will never draw breath again. Ichigo blasts Yhwach within the palace. However, Yhwach is shocked when Jushiro Ukitake's Kamekake appears in the palace and wraps itself around the Soul King. Recognizing this as the work of Mimihagi, the one being whom his eyes cannot predict, Yhwach demands to know if the Soul King's right hand is beginning to feel sentimental toward Soul Society after protecting it for all this time. Yhwach attempts to destroy both the Soul King and Mimihagi, but is stopped by Ichigo, who grabs his arm and dispels his attack. Asking Ichigo why he is doing this, Yhwach points out how he is the one who cut the Soul King in half and states that Ichigo's blood cannot permit the Soul King's existence, but Ichigo states he is here to save all the realms, prompting Yhwach to demand to know if Ichigo believes that he is the only one who can do this. Ichigo proclaims he cannot simply sit by before blasting Yhwach within the palace with a Getsuga Tensho. When Ichigo tells him that he will not do his bidding despite Yhwach's blood running in his veins, Yhwach claims that this will be decided by his eyes alone. Yhwach rips Mimihagi off of the Soul King. Yhwach tells Ichigo that he has never intended to make Ichigo do his bidding. When Ichigo questions what this means, Yhwach claims that all of Ichigo's battling and growth up until now have been in preparation for him killing the Soul King and that all of Ichigo's decisions benefited him because they share the same blood, prompting Ichigo to angrily attack him before proclaiming that he still intends to stop him. However, Yhwach asks Ichigo if his resentment toward him is truly justified before claiming that it is Ichigo's own weakness that led to his mother dying. After Uryu appears and shoots Yoruichi in the shoulder, causing her barrier around the Soul King to shatter, Yhwach catches the top half of the Soul King. Yoruichi begins throwing spheres at him, but Yhwach has Pranita warp her arm before throwing her out of the palace himself. After Uryu distracts and attacking Ichigo, Yhwach rips Mimihagi off of the Soul King. Yhwach absorbs the power of Mimihagi. After Uryu knocks Ichigo and the others off the palace, Mimihagi attempts to attack Yhwach, who merely wonders if it is trying to hinder its own child before dispersing it with a strike. Noting that Mimihagi is now far below him, Yhwach absorbs Mimihagi through his hand and decides to take everything that once belonged to the Soul King before firing a beam of darkness through the floor of the palace. As his beam strikes the Shakunmaku and spreads a veil of darkness over the Serete, Yhwach begins staggering before dissolving into a mass of one-eyed black creatures that begin swarming the Schutzstaffel. Hashwalth appears and explains that Yhwach is unable to keep all of the Soul King's now released power within himself and is simply releasing it in the form of these creatures as the swarm begins pouring out of the palace and heading for the Serete below. Yhwach completely absorbs the Soul King. Soon after, Yhwach completely absorbs the Soul King. When Hashwalth and the others enter the Soul King's chambers, which are covered with darkness, Yhwach turns around to reveal that he has gained a mask of eyes across his face. Noticing Askin backing away from him in shock, Yhwach wonders if he is afraid and assures them that they will get used to it before noting that he never expected to have too much power as the top of the palace shatters. When a kneeling Hashwalth asks him to lead them, Yhwach addresses him as his firstborn and states they will begin by creating a new country for the Quincy. Hashwalth reports to Yhwach. Yhwach brings the Wandenreich city to the Soul King Palace, which he connects to the surrounding cities to form a Quincy Zaishin. Soon after, he creates a large, tower-like palace for his new stronghold. When Ichigo, his friends, and the Godai 13 arrive in the Soul King Palace, Hashwalth reports their intrusion to Yhwach, who decides to make the tower the cornerstone of his new world, the Warweld. Soon after, Lil Tato Lampert and Giselle Jewel confront Yhwach, who quickly dispatches the two before returning to his slumber. Yhwach is confronted by Ichigo. While sleeping, Yhwach has a vision of Ichigo arriving and bifurcating him. He then wakes up as morning arrives, regaining the Almighty as he remarks that his dream was wonderful to the point of being a nightmare. Ichigo then arrives at the throne room, and Yhwach asks him what took him so long to arrive, referring to him as his son of darkness. Ichigo stands before Yhwach, who notes that Ichigo's newly attained true power is causing his Reiatsu to become visible around him before revealing that he is not using the Almighty to predict Ichigo's moves because he wants to savor this reunion. When Yhwach claims that Isshin Kurosaki was merely a surrogate father for him, Ichigo decries him being his parent because he is the one who killed Masaki Kurosaki. Yhwach stops Ichigo's assault. As Yhwach claims Ichigo is still a petulant brat, Ichigo leaps toward him and fires a Getsuga Tensho, which Yhwach blocks with a torrent of Reiatsu that attacks Ichigo, prompting Orihime to block it with Santen Kessun. When the Reiatsu pushes past the barrier, Ichigo cuts through it with his shorter sword before leaping toward Yhwach once more, only for the Reiatsu to stop his assault as Yhwach claims that Masaki died so he could create Ichigo. Proclaiming that Ichigo should not sulk because there is no greater honor than this, Yhwach flings him into a wall before standing up as he prepares to demonstrate his true power. Yhwach tells Ichigo that they are done talking as Ichigo charges at him again. Berating Ichigo for charging in so recklessly, Yhwach stifles Ichigo with Reiatsu again as he says that they should not rush things since Ichigo's death is inevitable. Yhwach tells Ichigo that it took a lot of work to create him and that he should stop making light of it, as his abilities were never his to begin with, before surrounding Ichigo with his Reiatsu. As Ichigo continues to charge him, Yhwach wonders why he is so eager to die and notes that he will destroy both Soul Society and the human world if not stopped. When Orihime covers Ichigo with her Santen Kessun, Yhwach points out how she is saying no by healing Ichigo and telling him to keep fighting before blasting Ichigo with more Reiatsu while ordering him to expend all his Reiatsu and die for his allies. However, upon seeing the tip of his blade turning white, Ichigo has Orihime block Yhwach's next blast with Santen Kessun. An explosion of Reiatsu engulfs Ichigo, prompting Yhwach to realize what his endgame is as the dust clears to reveal Ichigo has entered a partially hollowified form. Yhwach is slashed by Ichigo's augmented Getsuga Tensho. After greeting a shocked Orihime, Ichigo confirms Yhwach's assessment that this is the form he takes on when melding with his hollow powers before explaining how he reforged his Zanpakuto after his hollow and Quincy powers came into balance with one another. As Yhwach grins at Ichigo's strategy of awakening his powers with his Reiatsu, Ichigo moves in front of Santen Kessun while telling Orihime to keep up her guard before unleashing his Reiatsu, which destroys most of the room around them. Yhwach commends Ichigo's power and forms his broadsword, only for Ichigo to grab him before slashing at close range. As more of the tower is destroyed by the force of the attack, Yhwach blocks Ichigo's blade with his bare hand and claims that he could not be harmed by Ichigo's level of strength before tossing him back. However, Ichigo proceeds to form a Getsuga Tensho and fuse it with a Grand Race arrow before firing it at Yhwach, who is cut deeply. Yhwach clashes with Ichigo. Noting that a combined attack like this is fitting for a racial hybrid like Ichigo, Yhwach grabs and repels the augmented Getsuga Tensho before proclaiming that Ichigo is out of his league. Ichigo clashes with Yhwach, who details Ichigo's probable train of thought before declaring that his window of opportunity is gone as he activates the Almighty, which he admits is the result of him no longer being able to underestimate Ichigo's power. Clashing with Yhwach repeatedly, Ichigo draws his other sword and strikes, only for Yhwach to form a second sword and repel Ichigo in turn. As Ichigo moves around, his feet are impaled by shadow blades emerging from the places he lands on, causing him to realize that Yhwach has set up traps. After planting his sword in the ground, Yhwach states that Ichigo has likely been told that the Almighty allows him to see the future, prompting Ichigo to note that his attack should not connect if this is true. Grinning, Yhwach slashes at Ichigo, who leaps back and lands on top of a pillar as Yhwach details his thought process of growth during a fight causing the future to change before telling him to stay there if he believes this. As Ichigo is stabbed by long shadowy blades from the wall behind him and falls to the ground below, Yhwach appears in front of him and reveals how Ichigo miscalculated by assuming that the future is linear before explaining how it is instead akin to countless grains of sand in the wind that he can choose and move between at will. Telling Ichigo to keep pushing forward and moving between grains of sand without despairing, Yhwach watches as Ichigo activates his Bankai. Yhwach breaks off part of Ichigo's Bankai. Immediately after Ichigo activates his Bankai, Tensei Zangetsu, in a burst of energy, Yhwach breaks off part of the blade with his bare hand, leading a shocked Ichigo to wonder how he did this without moving. Yhwach notes that Tensei Zangetsu is indeed a fearsome Bankai and reveals that he used the future to break it before breaking off Ichigo's horn as well while reminding him to not drop his guard. When Yhwach throws his horn at him, Ichigo bashes it away with the remainder of his Bankai, only for Yhwach to appear behind and slash him out of the air and into the ground below. Attacking Ichigo once more, Yhwach closes in on him and slashes, only for Orihime's Santen Kessun to block his blade. However, Ichigo is still wounded, prompting Yhwach to reveal that the Almighty lets him transform the future as well as foresee it before telling Ichigo to despair for him. Yhwach grabs Ichigo after breaking his spirit. Yhwach states that the Almighty is no different from Ichigo and Orihime's powers because he can also influence only what he can see, which is the entirety of fate. Yhwach claims that Ichigo has only been able to overcome his despair and change his fate up until now because he was not present, and declares that he will cut down any future Ichigo tries to create for himself before telling Ichigo that he can begin despairing now, prompting Ichigo to begin screaming in anger. Soon afterward, Ichigo coughs up blood after being attacked by Yhwach, who grabs him by the head while noting that he expected more of a fight from Ichigo. When Ichigo loses all hope of winning, Yhwach drops him while claiming that all Ichigo accomplished was providing him with some entertainment before preparing to take back the power he had given to Ichigo. Yhwach departs from the Soul King Palace to bring ruin to all of existence. Black veins encompass Ichigo and the surrounding area as Yhwach absorbs his Quincy and hollow powers. As his merged hollow form dissipates, Ichigo falls to the ground, unconscious, as Yhwach laughs maniacally before initiating a third Ausvalen, which drains power from Hashwalt and kills Gerard. Power is drawn from all over the area to the top of Arwelt, where Yhwach has opened a portal and bids Ichigo farewell while promising to bring ruin to all of existence now that he no longer has need for him with a stern ritter. When Rukia and Renji appear, Yhwach expresses annoyance at having so many weaklings be sent after him and notes that they are probably too exhausted to take another step before deciding to leave the portal open so they can pursue him if they wish, which he will reward them for by slaughtering them in their time of greatest happiness. As he promises them that they will feel the looming shadow of death for all eternity, Yhwach steps into the portal. Ichigo and Renji attack Yhwach. Shortly afterward, Yhwach arrives in the Sarete, where he is greeted by Aizen in his chair. After destroying Aizen's restraints, Yhwach responds to Aizen's claim of Ichigo giving him too much trouble in the Soul King Palace by reminding Aizen that he was the one whom Ichigo defeated before noting that protecting Soul Society does not seem like something that would be in Aizen's best interests. When Ichigo and Renji suddenly attack him from behind, Yhwach repels them and claims to have already foreseen Ichigo coming here and having his Bankai broken once more. However, when Tensa's Angetsu is merely cracked instead of completely destroyed as he had planned, Yhwach notes that Ichigo possesses a great deal of good fortune. Ichigo unleashes a powerful Getsuga Tensho on Yhwach. After pushing Ichigo back with a blast of Reiatsu that destroys part of Sokyoku Hill, Yhwach questions why he did not let Orihime heal his wounds prior to coming here before reminding Ichigo that he was told he would be unable to do anything even if he followed. When Renji seemingly attacks him with his Bankai, Yhwach severs his left arm while claiming that all Bankai are rendered impotent against him before deciding to crush Renji with his own hands in order to prove this point. Suddenly, Aizen appears with Kyokusui Getsu in hand and intervenes, prompting Yhwach to ridicule him for defending one of the losers which he so detests, before using Hado number 99. Goryoten Mitsu, which ruptures the ground around them and forms a large energy dragon in the air above his eyes and rushes forward. Despite this, Yhwach merely points out that Aizen's sword is cracked before sending him hurtling back with an energy blast. When Ichigo appears behind him, Yhwach blows off his arm and stops his blade while noting that Ichigo decided to ally himself with Aizen before pointing out how even Kyokusui Getsu was useless before his power. Reminding Ichigo that he can see everything, Yhwach shatters Tensa's Angetsu and bids Ichigo farewell before seemingly blowing a hole in his torso as he prepares to destroy Soul Society. However, Aizen, having disguised himself as Ichigo, merely notes that Yhwach's vision of Ichigo attacking him is interesting while impaled on Yhwach's hand. Suddenly, the real Ichigo impales Yhwach from behind with Tensa's Angetsu before unleashing a powerful Getsuga Tensho. Ichigo cuts Yhwach in half. As Ichigo cuts him in half, Yhwach dissolves into a mass of darkness, which shortly afterward engulfs a shocked Aizen. Noting that the power of Kyokusui Getsu appears to have run out, Yhwach reforms as he asks Ichigo if he really thought an attack of that caliber would be enough to kill him before proclaiming that he can even rewrite futures where he dies using the Almighty. Yhwach bashes Tensa's Angetsu out of Ichigo's hand and engulfs him and the rest of the Sarete in his darkness before declaring that everything will lose its form and become one before his power. However, Yhwach is interrupted when Uryu fires the silver arrowhead through his chest, to the surprise of both him and Ichigo, as his darkness suddenly clears from his body, prompting Uryu to tell Ichigo to move now. With his cracked Bankai in hand, Ichigo leaps toward Yhwach, who is beginning to regain his powers and seemingly shatters the blade in his hand. However, the blade instead crumbles to reveal the original Zangetsu in Ichigo's hands, prompting a stunned Yhwach to realize that this is what Hashwalt was trying to warn him about with his dream as Ichigo cuts him in two. Yhwach grabs hold of Zangetsu and laments to Ichigo how the path is being closed to the world without fear, and further laments how existence will continue as it always has in a cycle of life and death. 10 years in the future, Yhwach attempts to use the Almighty to destroy the future by infiltrating it with his Reiatsu, but due to Ichigo defeating him 10 years prior, the Reiatsu vanishes altogether. Yhwach's Quincy Cross. Quincy Cross. Yhwach carries a version of the Quincy Cross, consisting of 5 points, which forms part of an elaborate, circular medal featuring a number of stars and a descending striped ribbon. This is attached to the left breast of his trench coat, so it is often concealed beneath his cloak. The cross was rendered useless when Ichigo Hyasube used his Ichimonji to remove its name, and therefore its power. Medallion. Yhwach possesses a round device which is roughly the size of a person's palm and has the Wandenreich insignia etched onto its surface. When activated, the device can steal a currently released Bankai in the immediate vicinity. Yhwach used it to take Captain Commander Genri Usai Shigakuni Yamamoto's Zanka no Tachi. Yhwach's power returns to him. Soul Distribution Power. Tamashio Waikatera Chikara. Yhwach was born with the innate ability to distribute a piece of his soul to another by being touched by them. Yhwach acquires power by bestowing an ability, allowing its wielder to cultivate it, and then taking it back. Flawless Healing. In Yhwach's distribution of his soul, the wounds which one's soul could not heal alone would finally heal. This power healed the physical, mental, and spiritual ailments of those who touched Yhwach. While the wound of a person healed, all of their knowledge, skills, and talents would be engraved inside the piece of soul they received from Yhwach. Those healed in this way had their lifespan drastically reduced, and once the person had died, the augmented fragment would return to Yhwach. In turn, Yhwach slowly gained the usage of his dormant motor skills and senses. Power Bestowal. Violetter Empowerment. While all Quincy have the power to collect reishi from their surroundings to make it theirs, Yhwach can do the opposite. He has the power to share his spirit with others. However, he eventually discovered a much more powerful way to distribute his soul. By engraving a letter, signifying an ability, directly onto another's soul, he could share out his soul more deeply, and with greater power. He does this by having others drink his blood within a ritual. Soul Absorption. Yhwach can forcibly retake the soul fragments of his soul that he has shared out. The only time that Yhwach can return to being the father of the Quincy and gather his strength is in his sleep. None can be permitted to disturb him while he rests. If he does not continue to absorb souls, he will eventually revert to his original state, completely deprived of his senses once more. Enhanced Condition Longevity. Every time he regains a piece of his soul, Yhwach becomes stronger and lives longer. Sleep-Induced Power Swapping. Yhwach and Hashwealth are two sides of a balanced scale. While Yhwach returns to being the father of the Quincy, Hashwealth take up the mask of the ruler in his stead, as they are connected. Once night falls and Yhwach falls asleep, his power will be swapped with Hashwealth's. The Balance. Zaburansu. Japanese for World Harmony. Yhwach gains Hashwealth's the balance while Hashwealth gains Yhwach's the Almighty. However, since Yhwach is asleep whenever he gets the balance, he does not use it. Yhwach revives himself using the Almighty. The Almighty. Gyoramati, Japanese for all-knowing and all-powerful. When Yhwach activates the Almighty, his irises and pupils split in two. After Yhwach was sealed away, it took 900 years for his heart to begin beating once more, 90 years for him to regain awareness, and 9 years for him to regain his power. If he were to open his eyes before those final 9 years had fully elapsed, he may have been unable to fully control his power and accidentally stolen all of the power from his loyal stern Ritter. With this power's activation, Yhwach achieves his full strength. Yhwach gains an additional pupil in each eye after nullifying Ichiba's Futen Taisatsurio. Omniprecognition. Yhwach can see everything that is to occur from the present moment into the far-flung future. He can know everything that lies within that gaze. Rather than seeing a linear future, Yhwach observes all possible futures at once like countless grains of sand in the wind, and can thus act accordingly using the knowledge he has gained to anticipate and counter his opponents. However, Yhwach is unable to predict the actions of Mimihagi, the right hand of the Soul King. Future Causality. Yhwach states that the true power of the Almighty is the ability to alter the future into whatever outcome he desires. He utilizes this power by setting up traps where he knows his opponents will be and preemptively attacking them before they realize. He can also outmaneuver any defense and countermeasure they use to protect themselves in order to facilitate his attacks. He can even alter the future if it would end in his death, in which the last remnants of his powers would attempt to resurface 10 years later. Power Intuition. Any power of which he knows will become his ally. Reactionary Power Immunity. That power will not only be unable to defeat him, but become unable to harm him in any way. Concussive Force. Yhwach can fire blasts of force powerful enough to send combatants as powerful as Yoruichi Shihoin and Ichigo Kurosaki flying from his hands. Consumption. Yhwach can consume other beings via physical contact, including higher beings, and in doing so, absorbs their powers and energy, and can contain their great essence within his body, making their power zone. The process can vary in length, being instant with those lower in power than him and taking longer for more powerful beings. Reishi manipulation. As a Quincy, Yhwach primarily absorbs spiritual energy from the atmosphere, and combines it with his own spiritual energy to form weapons. He has an easier time collecting this energy in environments with higher concentrations of Reishi such as Soul Society or Hueco Mundo. Yhwach can collect Reishi and solidify it at will. He created an intricate throne, which he later deconstructed with ease, and reconstructed it into a set of steps in order to ascend to a higher level of Silburn. High-rank Jaku Master. After destroying the 1st Division HQ, Yhwach moved a great distance and appeared behind Yamamoto without being noticed. He overwhelmed Ichigo while the latter was using his Bankai, Densa Zangetsu. Blut, Boruto, German for blood, Japanese for blood guys, an advanced Quincy technique which grants one inhuman offensive and defensive capabilities, generated by making Reishi flow into the user's blood vessels. The independent forms for attack and defense cannot be employed simultaneously. Blut Vene, Boruto Vene, German for blood vein, Japanese for stilled blood guys. With his Blut Vene active, Yhwach can withstand a Bankai-enhanced Getsuga Tensho without sustaining any injury. Spirit Weapon. Yhwach's Sword. Reishi Sword. Using his Quincy Cross, Yhwach can gather both spirit energy and particles and transform them into weapons. Unlike the bows displayed by most other Quincy, his particular weapon manifests in the form of an ornate sword, reminiscent of a Dadao, with a relatively long handle and a crossguard shaped like a bird. Zunktbogen. Zankudo Bogen, German for Saint Bow, Japanese for Great Holy Bow. Yhwach manifests an enormous bow anywhere within his general vicinity with proportionally large high-leg file, which carry enough force to propel him back up to the Soul King Palace with a single shot. Soul King powers. After absorbing the Soul King in his right hand, Yhwach gains a wide variety of new powers and abilities,